You're listening to the Cantina Cast, your home for thought-provoking Star Wars talk. Join Albert and Jonesy in breaking down the latest news, trailers, movies, and of course, your favorite characters from a galaxy far, far away.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Cantina Cast. My name is Albert Padilla, and this is episode 429, our Shadow of the Sith breakdown, the long-anticipated novel. Well, I wouldn't say that it was long-anticipated, but it was certainly a novel that I was looking forward to personally, with not a lot of expectations in terms of, where this thing was even going to go. I hadn't even heard of Adam Christopher, to be honest. So what a pleasant surprise. It's going to be a lot of fun to talk about this and really kind of get into... I think what we're going to do is try to approach this at a pretty high level, kind of talk about some of the basic themes, get into some of the characters, and then save some of the additional content, some of the deeper dive content for future episodes, because there's quite a bit to pick apart here, and I mean that in an all positive way. And speaking of positivity, let me bring on our fellow co-host, and what's the shirt you got on there tonight? What is that?
St. Arnold's Brewing Company.
Oh, okay. It looked like a Nintendo shirt. So
it is. Right. It's an 8-bit version of it. Yeah.
All right. So
St. Arnold is a patron saint of brewing.
Exactly.
Actually, I was going to make a comment on your shirt. You've got a Sporting a Bad Batch shirt going on tonight.
I do. You want to know where I got this shirt at?
Where?
Little fancy boutique called Five Below.
Oh, really?
So I paid $5 for this shirt at Five Below. Yeah, they had this one and they had like a couple other ones, and I thought, well, $5, why the hell not? You know what I mean?
I love Five Below.
Yeah, I mean the back's missing, but as long as I face the camera, you can't really tell. So
it's got a hole in the back.
Yeah, it's got a big hole in the back, and it's totally fine. Done. But for the show, it's great. How are you doing tonight?
Doing pretty well, man. Doing pretty well. Looking forward to talking about this, following up from our interview with Adam Christopher, the author of Shadow of the Sith. So
yes,
fantastic opportunity to talk with him.
Well, why don't you plug that, since we're already you brought it up?
Oh, sure, yeah. So we had the luxury of meeting with Adam and having him join the show on this past Friday, and you can find that video if you're a Patreon member. We put the uncut video out there on Patreon, so cantinacast.com/Patreon. But the show is out there for everyone effective this morning, Saturday morning. Patrons have had it since the weekend, so just perks for them. But we were able to go in and talk. Albert and I had a bunch of questions for him about maybe some of the approaches to the book, a little bit of a deeper dive on some of the characters as well. So hopefully a little bit different flavor than what, if you've listened to Adam Christopher interviews on other shows, a little bit different from what some of those have been, and get a little bit to know him. And then Albert had this amazing idea for a Force lightning round, which was insane fun, especially when you got the action figure throwdown.
Yeah.
Oh, and also the shameless, like who spoke, was it Anakin or Darth Vader in part 6 of Obi-Wan Kenobi, and then what was the other one we always worry about?
I don't know.
Creepiest character, either Maz or that was, everybody was wrong on that one. You guys were both wrong. And if you want to hear Albert tell our guest how wrong he is, go check out episode 428.
Yeah. He was such a good sport, about it too. Playing that Force lightning round, because it's really just like 20 questions really quickly answered, and we kind of broke away and elaborated on just a few of them. But he was such a good sport, and even though I was kind of ribbing him about some of his choices there, like Mace Windu. Come on, who is that guy? Nobody knows who that guy is. But it was great, great fun. Go ahead and check that. Listen to the audio, or if you're a Patreon member, you can watch the video. I think it's funnier watching the video because you can actually see how much Adam was enjoying himself too. He was just laughing and cracking up, and that was always good. So it was so much fun. I can't wait.
Thanks for him. Yeah, huge thanks to him for making time for us. I mean, he's a whole 6 hours ahead of us, so making it work was really cool. And not to spoil or anything, but I'm accumulating people in my camp on a couple things. So I'm winning the battle.
We need to have I don't know, see if you can put something together on the website where we can have these running battles and keep score. I'm fine if I'm losing. I think it'd be fun.
Consider it done.
But yeah, no, it's a great interview. That 20 question lightning round thing. I know he's been doing a lot of interviews with a lot of different shows, but I guarantee you no one's done that yet, and that really kind of sets us apart. So it's a lot of fun. Go listen to it and check it out. All right, let's get into a couple of things with news. First off, Pour one out for the homies. It looks like Star Wars Hunters has been delayed again. And not only has it been delayed again, but now it's been delayed until 2023.
But is this really a surprise?
I mean, I guess not, but
I mean, the feedback on the beta or the alpha, whatever it was pretty rough.
I played it over at
Celebration, right?
and it was fine. I don't understand.
I thought you had criticisms of it.
No.
Somebody else I was talking to played it though, and they were pretty critical of it. I'm trying to remember who that was though.
The only criticism I had was the demos that they had available were all on mobile phones, so you couldn't use a controller, and that was kind of wonky. But in terms of
Switch,
it wasn't like on a Switch where I didn't have a controller to play with. It was literally with the phone, touch and screen. And it's not what I do. I get there are people out there, and that's probably the way things are going, the way things have gone for a very long time now. But it was very awkward to play it with the phone for me personally. But that said, I mean, maybe it's hard. Maybe that's not fair. Maybe it's hard to gauge the gameplay because I'm playing on that, right? Had I had a Switch, I probably could have given you a better assessment of the gameplay. But I can tell you that the graphics and the sound, and it wasn't buggy, it wasn't locking up. There were a couple levels that you could play, so it wasn't like they had a very sterile environment that had been run through a bunch of Q&As so that there wouldn't be any mishaps there at Celebration. So I don't know. I thought it was fine. I get it, right? I mean, they canceled, or they didn't cancel it. They delayed it because of, quote, high expectations, which
is usually code for hot mess.
Yeah, hot mess, exactly. And the one thing that worries me is that how many Star Wars games have tried to come out of mobile devices that have been, quote, delayed because of high expectations. I mean, it's the same line they use, unfortunately, and I don't mean to throw shade on them, but I've seen this story
so far
many
in
times,
the cycle, though, that it seems reasonable that this one will come out. Yeah. I mean, like you said, it was in a very finished state. I'm just wondering if maybe they found some really severe gameplay gaps, or the game wasn't robust enough. And that's my fear, is that the game just didn't have a robust enough, either single player or PvP or whatever it was pretty repetitive and not hitting the mark over an extended period of time to where people would drop it pretty quick.
Yeah.
And so I think that's probably my mind is drifting a bit more when you have a game that you're ready to demo to a pretty substantial public and presumably get some feedback, and then all of a sudden 2 months later say, no, we're going to delay the whole, another 6 months or something.
Yep. Okay. Also, Star Wars number 25 came out. We were fortunate to get the early release on that one, and I guarantee you that as soon as that thing came in, I wanted to read it immediately because I knew that there were going to be these 4 stories, and Kylo Ren was in there. This was kind of if you're not keeping up with comics, this is Charles Soule's final comic after 8 years, I think, of writing Marvel.
His 100th issue of Star Wars.
Yeah, which is awesome.
So, what are your initial assessments of the stories? Solid, great.
So there's 4 stories. There's The Lesson, which is Obi-Wan Kenobi and Anakin. This is, between episodes 1 and 2. Then there's The Lesson, same title, which was the Darth Vader one. That came out after episode 3. The Kylo Ren one is called See You Around, Kid, and that was right after The Last Jedi. And then there was the Poe Dameron one, which I don't remember. Oh, it was set after
A Eulogy 9. For Snap. Yeah, that's got to be after episode 9.
Yeah, he dies in 9. So, quickly. So these stories, like if you read that whole thing, that Charles Soule has an intro like in that in the comic, but if you read that, he mentions that these were stories that he wanted to include at some point, or just ideas that he had that didn't really make sense, it didn't really fit in. So he just kind of compiled all these together. And so from that perspective, I get it. So they're not really meant to be complete whole stories beginning to end. They're almost kind of like short segments or cut scenes, if you will, from like an episode. And so
these are almost like what they throw into the annuals.
Exactly.
Kind of what it feels. It feels like an annual, actually.
It feels like an annual. Yep. But it's an issue. And so I would say the first 2 I thought were really good. Like I really enjoyed the Obi-Wan Kenobi, Anakin, the lesson there. And that is really talking about the lesson of why, and I won't spoil it because I think I'd like to talk about this more.
Well, it doesn't come out till tomorrow too. So yeah.
Oh, it's not till tomorrow? Oh crap. Sorry. Okay. I thought it was today.
No, we can give you're giving a preview. That's fine.
I'm giving a preview. It's about why Jedi choose to use lightsabers. Why don't they go around using everything else? Why a lightsaber, that particular weapon of all types, right? And then the lesson from Vader, which is the second story, is almost the inverse of that, which I thought was very cool. So I love those 2 stories back to back together. The Kylo Ren story, like that one, just I don't know. I didn't really care for it, and I didn't really care for the art. Sorry, Will Sliney. I know he was like Sliney. He's been doing some really good stuff. I think he did the Kylo Ren comic, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, I believe
as well. I don't know. I didn't like the way it came across. There was one panel in particular. I'm like, oh, that doesn't look like Kylo Ren at all. He looks like he's, hemorrhaging of some sort. And then the Poe Dameron one, which was just okay. Like, I'm not a big Snap Wexley fan. I mean, he's cool, and I didn't mind him in the Aftermath series, and I understand Bones and what he's contributed and all that stuff for Mr. Bones, but I don't know. It was fine. I guess it's probably for a certain audience that really loves Poe Dameron, Black Squadron, and Wex and all that. So if that's your thing, you'll probably enjoy that a lot more than I did. But
so this definitely feels like an annual. Then you have some kind of hits and misses, and a little in between as well.
Yeah. But overall, I mean, this guy has done some amazing stuff, and he's given some stuff.
Yeah.
Some of the things that we may talk about tonight from the comic books. And so, as a creative director, I'm super excited to see where. I mean, normally when somebody like this leaves, you're like, oh, that sucks, because you don't know what's going to happen to them. But I mean, he's so entrenched and so ingrained into the fabric of Star Wars these days that he is going to go on and do more things. And whether it be in Star Wars during this time period, later down the road, maybe it's more focused on High Republic, or maybe he just takes a more holistic, broader approach to Star Wars in general as his creative director that he is now. Or what is it? Is it creative director was his title?
I believe so. Something like that.
Something like that. Yeah. So he's going to have his hands in a lot of different things. And I think he's done really good work. I mean, I wouldn't put him up there with like the Dave Filoni's, or maybe I would, but he's a different style, and he's got a lot of stories and a lot of great ideas.
Yeah. And speaking of comics, solicits for October are now starting to come out, which is when the High Republic gets started back up.
Yep.
So some first looks kind of coming out. Still not a lot of covers or anything like that, but
that cover, the cover to High Republic #1, that caught my eye.
Yep.
Because we see Jeddah in the background. We knew it was going to take place in Jeddah, but those statues that we saw in Rogue One, where you could see those big Jedi statues, those stone things or whatever that would fallen over. We get to see those upright. So we'll see the origin of where that all happened.
I have a feeling we're getting a lot of really cool Easter eggs in the comic books for the High Republic. So I'm excited about those to see what we get. But yeah, so just around the corner. And for those interested, you can start your pre-orders and all of that.
Okay.
Right. Before we get in the show, quick shout out and thank you to all of our Patreon members. We have our now part of the tribe members, Mike, Kathy, Rob, Lauren, Dante, and of course, Risk. And then our top tier Delusions of Grandeur member, Rod. Thank you so much. If you're curious about what we offer on Patreon, encourage you to go over to cantinacast.com/Patreon. And you can see you can get early release, you can get exclusive releases, kind of like the video with Adam Christopher, and any of the extra content that we do. We started doing previews on the main feed for some of the character deep dives like Riva and some others that we've done. But so if those are things that are interesting you, I encourage you to go check it out. Once again, cantinacast.com/Patreon.
Very cool. Okay, before we start though, I have one last breaking news item.
Breaking news.
I just happened to check my mail. I just happened to check my mail. And
did you finally get it?
Guess what finally came in the freaking mail? Look at
Your
that.
second copy of Brotherhood? Oh, that was your second copy of Brotherhood.
No. So I had this. Well, I won't go over into. I had this thing where I thought I had gotten the book in. And it was on. We were. What was it? The
we were live.
We did.
Yeah.
And I was like, wow, look at this, guys. And it was the Al Capone's.
That was great, man. You're like, I'm gonna unbox it live on camera.
Yeah, and it was Brotherhood. And I know I love Brotherhood. I like Mike Chen. Nothing against them. I just really thought it was going to be this book, and but no, thankfully it came in. It's beautiful. It's absolutely gorgeous. I know Jones has already shown this, but my goodness, I need to like display this forever somewhere. And it smells great. It smells like paint. So it's wonderful.
You want to be book buddies?
We can be book buddies. Yeah. Oh, and so what number did you have?
30 something.
Oh, so I beat you there. I got 204.
309. Yep.
So no 66. One day I will get 66 as the number for my books, but no, not today.
We can all hope to achieve such greatness.
And Qui-Gon Jay's already chimed in, but if you're with us tonight and you've had a chance to read the book, please go ahead and throw I'd love to hear your comments as well. I'll throw his up right now. It says the book is absolutely fantastic, and listening to Adam Christopher review about an hour ago makes it even better. So thanks for already listening to the interview, and hopefully that's a good companion. And by the way, we are going to spoil just about everything in the book. Well, maybe not everything because we're not going to get into everything tonight, but we will be spoiling as much as we can. So if you've not had a chance to go back or read it or listen to the audiobook, hang up and come back later.
Yeah, and not to oversell it, but Adam got into a lot of the details and some smaller niches and things too. So it's a great compliment to any review you've heard, whether you listen to ours, if you listen to somebody else's or deep dives into it. It's always great to get the ideas of the creators themselves into it.
Yeah, how the sausage is made, or the soup, or pizza.
Soup.
Sausage always sounds disgusting.
It does.
Okay,
but it's delicious.
It really is.
All right, why don't you give us a rundown on the book real fast?
Okay, I will do my best here because I don't know. He took him like 1,500 pages, and I got like 8 bullets here. Okay, so this was set 19 years. This is set 19 years after the events of Return of the Jedi. Uchi of Bestoon is recruited by Palpatine to find Rey. Lando overhears Uchi talking about this in a bar. He's bragging, he's drunk, and eventually he locks in on the word Sith. Right, because the Sith are involved, and that kind of sets off his spidey senses. And at that point, he decides that I'm gonna have to go reach out to Luke because they were also mentioned Exegol and that sort of thing. So Luke gets roped in that way, and then together they go out to try to find this family, with the girl, which they never catch up with. And this ties back. Adam's said this on many interviews now about how was this story pitched, and they really said, look. This one line from The Rise of Skywalker about Luke and Lando going, searching for Uchi of Bestoon, blah, blah, blah. That was all they told him he had to, that's the only thing that he had to write about. No other kind of restrictions or barriers and that sort of thing. And I want to talk about that here in just a little bit when we talk about what worked for us. So along the way, there's an acolyte from the Beyond, or an acolyte of the Beyond named is it Kiza or Kaiza? What was it, the audiobook?
Kaiza. And actually, Adam has said Kaiza, yeah.
Okay, I'm going to have to change my notes because I have forever called her Kiza.
I sent you a text with all the
I know, but
phonetic.
You sent me a lot of other pics too that I don't like looking at, but no, I'm kidding. So the acolyte beyond named Kaiza, that's going to be weird trying to say that, is trying to find Exegol as well. She's possessed by an ancient Sith, which is the shadow of the Sith. Okay, for just to reference the book.
Ancient evil.
Ancient evil. And the book ends with Uchi dying on Pisana, Luke destroying the mask that Kaiza was possessed by, Rey being left behind on Exegol, Rey's parents being murdered, Lando living.
Wait, I gotta stop you. Rey was left on Jakku.
Oh, Jakku. Sorry, it's not Exegol.
Right.
Yep. Sorry about that. I'm updating the notes here. There we go. Okay. Left behind on Jakku, Rey's parents being murdered, Lando living his life on Pisana, and Anakin's Force Ghost. So what did you think? What did I leave out? Is there anything that I left out of that, or you really need to read the rest of the book at this point?
I think those were the main highlight points. Well, there was another character called Komat, who was really cool. Yeah, Komat was really cool too. Another tie to the Acolytes of the Beyond and with Kaiza as well. So, but no, that's a fairly good summary there, and 8 bullet points. What took him almost 500 pages to write. So. We definitely need to tell him, hey, I don't know what the big deal was. We did this in 8 bullet points. I don't know why you needed so many pages.
Uh-huh. All right, so tell me, what worked for you?
Yeah, so I mean, going into the premise of the book, right, it's one of those, the idea of filling in the gaps, right? This episode 6.5 is how Adam has described it a number of times. And I think it's very much what it is. And when you go in and you start reading this book, and the further you get through it, it's like, man, these are all the things I felt like I was completely lost on the sequel trilogy, or that they glossed over perhaps a little too much, right? This reference to what Luke and Lando were doing, Rey's parents, the Sith blade, things like that seemed important, but we didn't really get that context. And so it was really nice to go pace through this book and have a lot of those things unveiled to us in the way that they made sense. And I think that's what is really striking a positive chord with a lot of people, is that not only is it talking about Rey and Rey's parents and getting to know them, getting to know Luke and Lando, who are a bit of an odd couple because we don't really see them on screen all that, well, really ever, for the most part, nothing meaningful really.
Yeah.
And then we also get a bit of a peel back the curtain on Exegol, and then Uchi, we just confirm that he's annoying as hell. And so it's a really, but it just keeps you going, and we get some artifacts by Luke. We get an idea of what Luke has been up to. We get a very different Luke Skywalker than what we got in the sequel trilogy. We see this transition, and so you just start to, just rolling them out there, you start to feel like, okay, It's got a lot of a great premise to work from. What's that execution going to look like? And it's there. This book, while it's a thick book, it has a really good pace to it, which I really appreciated because this one really could get bogged down. And what I thought was really nice too is you get so many Easter eggs and little tidbits here and there that if you're you and me, you get a lot out of that. It enhances the material, but you won't get lost if you don't get it or if you completely goes over your head.
Yeah.
But it was really cool. I mean, Lor Santeca, about a little bit of Ben Solo. So, I mean, you get just a little bit of these things and you just get little things. And so when you go back and you rethink about the sequel trilogy in particular, it takes on a whole new spin, which is really, usually when you get this, when you get the novelization of the movie, but I think this book has been better than any novelization that we've had, I think, in years. Like for that actually complements the movies, where the novelizations have good parts, but I think this one really does complement those stories in a way that the novelizations, maybe couldn't or didn't. So what are your initial kind of impressions for you?
Well, before I get into that, I want to touch on something you just said, because I actually had that in my show notes as well. So just full disclosure, I'm probably going to be jumping around my notes. I'm just looking at them right now. They're a hot mess. So there's been a crazy week here, and so I may be throwing other things like, oh yeah, I really like that too. And I really like this too. So my list isn't going to be comprehensive out of the gate. Okay. Now that said, you mentioned that this was the best, I guess I'm going to call it a tie-in novel, because it's what it feels like, right?
Yeah, I agree.
And I was picking up on that as well. Like when I think about, like, don't get me wrong, I loved Catalyst. I loved Rebel Rising. I'm trying to think of some of the other ones. What was some of the ones leading up to Force Awakens that came out? I'm drawing a blank right now. But the Disney era, and I want to say it probably is a Disney era. That's probably fair, because we really weren't doing this when the movies were coming out. It's a little different. Back when before Disney, the movies had to come out first, and then you could write about some stories, but you couldn't write about most stories at all, right? Like
Right.
you had to really tippy toe around it. And for as much as we love the Legend series, when you go back and you look at them, I think there are some really good books out there that stand out on their own. The Thrawn the Thrawn books come to mind because this was a new character. He wasn't stepping into like some of these established characters like Luke, Leia, Han, Lando, etc. But it always felt like they were constrained in that regard. Then we get to the Disney era, and they were allowed to tell these stories that led up to the movies, but they were so like on the surface at times.
They felt they didn't really feel like they fed into them all that much, except they had some of the characters.
Exactly. And so now I'm going back to Legends again. So the other Legends books that I thought worked really well were the ones where they allowed them to explore some of the things that were being laid down in the movies themselves. And that's where this book feels like they could have probably wrote a book like this before the movies came out. I don't think it would have had as much, to be honest, because I think it would have spoiled way too much, and it would have taken a lot of the luster from the movie,
Right.
from The Rise of Skywalker. But because they almost did the inverse of this, they went back to that kind of Legends formula. It allowed somebody like Christopher to go in and really just, I mean, he had a blank check in terms of what he wanted to write about. You know what I mean? He could pick up on pieces here and there and decide to dive into them. And in the interview that we talked about, he kind of goes into that process itself and was able to include all those Easter eggs that you mentioned and little tidbits here and there, things that he could hook in people that were familiar with it and didn't necessarily weigh in on the story too much if you didn't understand it. So in that regard, I just feel like I'm with you that this is one of the better tie-in books that we've had, but I really feel it's because they allowed him to go in and do that stuff without going in before the movie trying to do it. I think had he gone in before this movie, I don't think we would have got this book, and I don't think we would have gotten into some of the lore and some of the details and some of the material that he was trying to convey because of the restrictions that would have had to been put on place.
I 100% agree. I mean, this book couldn't have be written before. And that's unfortunate because it really did help the sequel trilogy in general, in Force Awakens and Rise of Skywalker in particular, but it makes sense. I mean, and I do want to give credit where it's due. Disney and Lucasfilm and whoever gave him the green light on this really did give him pretty much free reign.
Yeah.
They didn't tell him no on a lot of things. I don't think they really told him no on much of anything. And anytime he thought he was pushing the bounds, it sounds like they were pretty okay with it, and they shaped a few things. But I mean, to have that flexibility and to not have to worry about the story you're telling, and you just let the story tell itself, things just kind of take on a natural progression. And I think it's a really important to give creative people that creative opportunity to do it. Sometimes that works out, sometimes it doesn't. But in this case, I think the way that he was going, he knew the story that needed to be fleshed out. And it helps that they had kind of this pre-pocket with Luke and Lando, and we just kind of figure out what happened in between. And well, of course these other things happen. Of course that happens. And of course this makes sense. And some of it, he makes it sound so natural is the part that's frustrating, because it's like, I know that wasn't the case. You probably spent weeks and weeks and weeks writing this book, but
yeah.
He makes it seem like it was like, well, yeah, of course this happened. And I'm like, well, I'm not a creative person in that kind of way. So it's foreign to me, but again, having that flexibility to do what he needed to do and what he wanted to do, I think is important. And that's the only way this book, I think, is as good as it is because of that flexibility and that liberty.
So two more points just quickly. Number one, I get that this wasn't a book being written in between the movies, right? That would have been a different story as well. Even if he had, let's say this book was let's say they came to him after The Last Jedi and said, we need you to write this book and it's going to tell some of the elements in the story, I still think he would have been hamstrung quite a bit, right?
Sure.
So because this is the last of the movies for now, it makes sense that they would probably give him much more free reign to kind of go and do whatever he wanted to do, so long as there are probably some natural borders in place. And then the second thing I want to mention is it's so hypocritical now that the same people that argue that the legend stuff is all amazing and the pre-Disney stuff is the best thing ever and all this post-Disney stuff is crap, et cetera, et cetera. They're the same people that will not acknowledge that this book is doing exactly what the Legends books. The way they're now looking at this book is, well, this is Disney retconning everything. This is Disney making up for whatever you had a problem with in the Rise of Skywalker or the
fixing
trilogy.
things.
Fixing things. Exactly.
Fixing plot holes, I think, is the main one I get to say.
And I'm like, you dummies. This is exactly what the Legends books did. The movies came out. They found something in there and they went and wrote a story about it. And yes, sometimes they would freaking retcon. Sometimes they would expand upon it or quote fix things. But because it's Disney, they've got a really big problem. So now that I got that off my chest.
You feel better?
I do feel better. Honestly, I do. But so that's all kind of hypocritical. Okay, let me get to the stuff I like, because this is at least 30 minutes. All right. So first off, the pacing. I enjoyed the pacing quite a bit. It felt like it was moving pretty rapid, especially my goodness, that first 20 chapters or so is just rapid succession of story, character introductions, and then tons and tons and tons of Easter eggs. And I want to talk about the Easter eggs in a little bit because I really enjoy that stuff, especially as somebody who did an entire podcast on
I was about to say,
One.
There's going to be the basement style Star Wars.
Oh, you could easily, I was thinking about that. We could do a whole series on just this book and go the same way, chapter by chapter, pull every Easter egg out, and then just
as if we needed more Patreon ideas.
We could easily do it, but I really enjoyed the number, and Beaumont Kin of all people, right? A character that was slapped in there at the very end, a lot of controversy around him, and then he finds a way to work him in here that makes sense. And I think that's the one thing about the Easter eggs is that all of these, like he said, and like you just said, sorry, but they all do kind of make sense, and they're there. And if you see them, cool. And if you don't, move on. And you probably are moving on because some of these are so deep
pretty deep cuts.
Yeah. Which is cool. I enjoy that. I actually really, really do enjoy that. But the pacing I thought was really great. I love the fact that it has smaller chapters. He tended to keep people and little stories together for 3-4 chapters, maybe at the time, probably no more than that, which is good. Sometimes when it's 5, 6, 7 chapters long, and depending on what's going on, that can feel man, I really want to get back to the other thread, right? And this one felt like it was going on. Now we'll come back to the criticism here a little bit because I do have a little bit of criticism with it, but I really enjoyed the pacing overall. I enjoyed how he writes. Again, had no idea who Adam Christopher was prior to this. I know now that he had done some Stranger Things. I kind of want to go back and read that because I'm really into the Stranger Things stuff. But I enjoyed his writing style, and I felt like he did a really good job with Lando. Of all the characters, I thought he connected with Lando the most. If you saw him for 2 weeks after Celebration, he was only wearing that Lando Calrissian shirt, that red one that you can get at Disney at the at Trader's Outpost or whatever it is over there at
Right.
I don't know what I'm talking about. You know
Yeah.
what I'm talking about. That Disney store, that Disney park thing.
Mhm.
Anyways, he was wearing that shirt. He's a huge Lando fan, so I really feel like he was able to kind of channel the spirit of that character, and more importantly, where Lando is in his life at this point too, because we were getting shades of the Donald Glover Lando. We were getting shades of some of the stuff that we'd seen in Last Shot, certainly from the movies. But then I think he captured a more I wouldn't say maybe grounded, more mature, having gone to a pretty big life experience with losing his daughter. I think he wrote that really well, and we'll get to that when we get to Lando here in just a little bit. Okay, page 2. I enjoyed the pulpiness of the book. Like, it felt Star Wars, but it felt like more old school. And I know he's credited the 78 comic strips, but it felt like pulpy Marvel, Sith blood, like, say knives with blood, and there was ghosts, and I mean, it just
Right.
felt like it was really out there in terms of like Star Wars, and we haven't had that, in my opinion, in quite some time. So I enjoyed that quite a bit. And then finally, I guess they're just the themes of like, and we'll get into these too, because I want to talk about like the themes of like rebirth and rediscovery. We talked to him about free will versus destiny, which I think is it runs forever in Star Wars.
Yeah.
But
The
thing-
showcase of family as well. Yeah.
well, and that was going to end with that one. The family aspect of it is what I really, really enjoyed the most. Like, I was dying to read the next chapter with Dathan and Mirror and Ray. And for me, just like, there was a time when I was like on a hill dying by myself. I felt like I was by myself, dying, saying that Ray's parents wouldn't have done that to her, that she wouldn't have so much conviction in her that her parents were going to come back. She says that they'll be back. They'll be back. Like, she's got so much confidence in her that she was either crazy, which I refuse to believe, or there was something there, that her parents really are good people, and they were and I don't know, there was just something about the way she portrayed that character, the way she delivered those lines, that led me to think that there's no way these people, and I struggled with this throughout The Last Jedi. I remember we did shows on this, especially when we get into the filthy junk traders comment, and I kept saying, no, I'm sorry, I refuse to believe it. And I get Adam's approach. It was, I mean, I didn't influence in any way, but it sounds like for him, I mean, because he could have wrote this either way, right?
He read a lot of your fan fiction getting ready for this novel.
Exactly what he did. That's a true story. We had to cut that part out, but I just absolutely love the fact that the family was a family, and that they showed more love for her and a lot. And of course, we'll talk about the decisions they made at the very end, which were, maybe not the most favorable, and certainly weren't easy decisions. But I don't think anybody comes out of this book thinking that Rey didn't love her parents and her parents didn't love her, and that Kylo Ren's just was kind of a big B for saying those things to manipulate her in the way that he did. So,
Right.
Let's just end the show there. I'm fine with it at this point, because I've said everything I had to say. And no, okay. Well, let's get into why don't we start there?
Yeah. Why don't we start with those?
So, why don't you go first? Because I've been on a tirade here.
Yeah. No. I mean, so we get an idea of where Dayton is from. We actually get his perspective on Exegol, and it's basically this hell of a place. He grew up in this environment, and with the acolytes and with the all of the Sith. I don't know what you want to call them, all the people who are crazies out there.
Mm-hmm.
And to know that you're this genetic creation of the Emperor, and you are uniquely special, which we find out on a body scan of him. There is something oddly unique about him. He's not been accelerated on the aging aspect, but he's also, there does seem to be something unique about him, which is a little ironic that they just kind of dispose of him at the end. But, but we get that aspect of him always running from something and not really feeling very special at all. And then you have Mirror, his wife, who gave up everything to be with Dathan, and who's a technological whiz. She's exceptionally smart, very kind, loving. And one of the aspects that was really important that Adam shared with us was that it was important for these characters to be very complementary. With a history like Dathan, it was vital for them to have a no secrets type of relationship, which I think worked exceptionally well. And really, I think when he said that, it was the key that I couldn't quite unlock that really said that why did this relationship work so well? And it's just that they had to keep adjusting and checking one another in different ways, right? And so, but the love that they had for Rey, everything they were doing was for her to try to keep moving, all the sacrifices they had made. I mean, they had nothing, right? And when we meet them, they're coming off of Jakku. So while they're not from there, I think he created the world of, what was it, Hypercarn or something like that for Mirror. Yeah. So, but we do get a very loving family, which was very touching. And I think you had said this on the show, that it was just really nice to see another example of a positive family dynamic, one that wants to stick together. It's important for them to stick together. And then for them to make these really difficult decisions towards the end where they know they have to, as they keep running, I mean, they just they have this pile of a junk ship for a while. They can't really do anything with it. They hobble from one place to another. They get a little lucky. It feels like their luck is going to run out after basically every 5 seconds, it kind of feels like.
Yeah.
Where it's like everything that seems like it's going right ends up going a little bit wrong, but I guess on the next stage. And, you know, but everything is for Rey. You know, Rey is what, 6, I think?
Yeah.
I think that's right. Yeah, 6 years old. So she's still very young, and she's not showing that we know of in that kind of forced way. But, you know, that's kind of where we're at though with these guys. And it was really important, I think, for them to be established in this very, you know, loving family. They all do it together. So when they have to break apart and they decide to leave Rey with Unkar Plutt, you know, is devastating for them. They didn't want it either, you know, and for Rey to have to experience that. And the really sad part is that what we see from the flashbacks of Rey, I mean, her family dies like 20 minutes later.
Yep. It's not very, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's literally not long after they depart Jakku that, you know, OG catches up to him, which is ironic because that was right when everything seemed like it was going to go their way. The bottom just completely fell out.
Yep. Because they could not outrun Steadfast. But we'll talk about Enric Pride here a little bit, because the more I love that guy so much. So the only thing I would add, which is probably a lot, the only thing I would add about Rey's parents and the family. Okay, so let's talk about Dayton just really quickly. He was, you know, he's the prime example in this. Although there were more, but he was the prime example of, you know, where I came from is not nearly as important as the choices that I make. And he makes that conscious decision to get off Exegol, to leave that life that he was living. I mean, he lived a life of despair. I mean, think about it. Growing up on Exegol as a kid, I don't think we ever got the explanation. We should have asked Adam that. Like, we never got a real explanation as to why Palpatine kept him alive, which I think is a very good, intriguing question. Nonetheless, he was allowed to live there as a child, and eventually he gets off world by it was through the help of one of the what was it, the simian, what was his name was Dathan, but it's that same kind of chimpanzee character that we saw that was reforging the helmet for Kylo Ren, but there was one called Dathan, and Dathan is the one that allowed him to get off. And so when he left, he took the name of Dathan. I don't know,
he didn't have a name, right?
Yeah, he'd never even had a name. He was just a living person that was a Castran kind of thing. So the fact that he made that conscious decision to go live a different life, and not only just live a different life, but a life of love, which is crazy to think about, given, you know, what he was probably witness to right on that planet, and sacrifices and this constant, the terrors and all that. I mean, Exegol is an amazing and fascinating place now, and I love the fact that they've continued to build it out. But coming from that, that's the last thing you would have thought he would have did. So I did enjoy that. For anybody that's not going to read this book and is looking maybe to us to answer some of the questions, I think one of the questions is that we've always had is why did they leave Rey to begin with? Why, and of all people, why did they leave them with Unkar Plutt? And what Adam does is he tells the story that Unkar Plutt is kind of, he's just a businessman, right?
Right.
At the end of the day, he wants money to get power, and through power he can get money. And although he may not be the nicest person, I think at one point they tell Rey right at the very end there, like, he's always grouchy or angry. That's just the way he is, and don't let that get to you, kind of thing. That's just kind of his attitude, demeanor, personality. But at the end of the day, he is somebody that they feel that they can trust, because he established earlier on in the book that they used to work with him. They used to work for him. And so he was trustworthy in that sense, as maybe as an employer. So they didn't really feel, and they didn't really have a lot of choices either, right? I mean, they didn't have a lot of people they could trust. And so, but
they felt like they knew his motivation, so they at least could appeal to that part of it.
Yep. And they kept he was going through Dathan was, at the very end, they're telling her it's just temporary, we'll be back. And
Right.
and they kept telling themselves that it is just going to be temporary, that we will be back. And it almost as a way to kind of, make peace with the fact that they were about to abandon their child, but they were doing it for her safety. And again, they never had any intentions, of course, dying. They understood the risks of it all. But if it was a choice between, the risk of them losing their lives versus Rey, they, made that choice. They took Rey out of the equation. They reduced the risk of Rey. So that's kind of why they leave. Now, the other question that comes up is, why was, like, this one, I think from The Rise of Skywalker, this is what blew my mind, was like, why was Ochi's ship leaving in that scene where we see her? And the short answer is they actually hijack his ship, Ochi's ship,
Right.
at one point. And it's a really cool sequence with Lando and Luke and all that. And I want to come back to that too after this here. But there's a really cool sequence. So they finally, they kind of get onto his ship and hijack it, and he doesn't know it. And so that's what they use to travel to Jakku. And so when you see Ochi's ship leaving, yes, it is his ship, but those are the parents that are in it, and they stole it. And so that explains it all. And it makes sense again when you read the book.
Right.
But here, so the one thing about the book too that I enjoyed, because we didn't really talk about the criticisms. Maybe we should, but the book did a good job, I thought, because I never thought they would find Rey's parents, right? I never thought Luke would get in contact with Rey's parents and Lando would ever meet Rey's parents, right? That would break some things. And I think he did a really good job of building that suspense.
Yeah,
because there were moments
they got so close, but they just missed each other. Yeah,
they just missed, like ships crossing the night, right? They just never did it. And there was really moments in there where Lando was like right about to go into and see them for the first time, and that would have completely changed everything. And then something happens, of course, and all that. So I thought that was good, that the way he did it.
Right. And for clarity, Luke and Lando never learn any of their names.
Yes, that's important.
Yeah, so it's important to set that, because they some people have been like, well, Luke knew about Rey and was chasing after Rey. Well, yes, but they didn't know who she was or what was special about them. They really didn't know anything about this family, except that, they had been, their kid was whisked away and they were on the run and struggling. And Lando was a bit obsessed.
Right. The only thing I could think that would even be a close connection, and this was never explored in the book, is when Luke asks Rey in The Last Jedi of where are you from? She's like, Jakku. And he's like, okay, yeah, that is in the middle of nowhere, or whatever he says. That was the only time, like, Jakku doesn't seem like a planet that's visited very often. Of course, it's now been 20 years or 18 years or whatever. No, it's only been like 10 years, sorry.
Right.
It's been like 10 years or so. So, I mean, I wouldn't expect Luke to hone in on that. But that would be the only thing that I could think of, because I think Lando at least knew that they had went to Jakku, right? They were leaving there or something. Maybe not. Yeah. I'm trying to remember now. So anyway,
I don't know if they knew that. I don't know that he knew that they stopped there or they came from there or anything like that.
I think it was just
another.
Ochi.
Yeah, Ochi. Yeah.
Sorry, I always said Uchi, and it's Ochi apparently. I think it's because of Muchi from Bad Batch. Okay, so where the heck was I? Oh, so I did enjoy everything about the family. That little the cat and mouse games that they played. They always seemed like they were one step ahead of Uchi and all of that, which was great. And then, unfortunately, the tragedy is they had to die, and we knew they were going to die. I don't think I was really prepared for the way they died, because they did die pretty violently, especially when you factor in like the knife and the way it was like thirsting for their blood. And I mean, it was
very sudden too. I mean, it was just out of nowhere. All of a sudden it was happening.
I think he gave them
very
like
abrupt.
One opportunity, I think, and I forget now if it was like, hey, where is she, whatever, and they refused to answer, and he was like, he stabbed her, then stabbed him, and it was just kind of the end of it. Or stabbed him and then stabbed her, I think is the
right.
order.
Yeah, no, Ochi was drinking basically antifreeze and getting fritzed out of his mind, but also the Sith blade was effectively kind of taking over and corrupting him quite a bit. Mm-hmm. The Sith blade actually felt a lot like High Republic, where something was singing and had a song and was talking to him in some ways, and he could feel the craving of it when it was hungry. All of these adjectives to just this insatiable hunger that it would get satisfied for a short term, but then it needed more. When it stabbed someone in the blood, it would actually absorb the blood into it. So it was a very creepy Sith-like blade. It was actually, it brought a whole new life. The blade felt like a character.
Yeah.
Whereas in the movie, it felt like very much just I wouldn't even call it a MacGuffin at that point. Now, they didn't explain the little Death Star thing when Rey holds it up, but the blade in general, you start to understand better the idea that, terrible things, have been done with this blade, or whatever the quote might be. But it was very cool that it had a life of its own. But it was very much corrupting him, and he wasn't thinking straight, and he was, again, drunk on effectively antifreeze and motor oil.
Yeah. Well, he ends up killing the two guys that he was with.
His henchmen, yeah.
He just slices them and splatters their blood all over the window and everything. He's just gone crazy by the end there, or gets obsessed by that. It is sentient. I think that was pretty clear that it had a consciousness at the very beginning of the book. They kind of established that.
Well, it has something imbued in it at the very least, yeah.
Yeah. Which is a lot of in this book when we get into
X and
Panchard as well. Panchard. Okay, so let's move on because I don't want to make this a deep dive because there are lots of things that we can continue to talk about. Let's talk about Luke Skywalker because this was, we brought up the whole Superman syndrome with him, and he kind of latched onto that as something that he was consciously thinking about that as he was writing Luke Skywalker. Like, how do you challenge somebody like this, and what is it like to be essentially a god living among mortal people? And that's definitely where Luke is at this point, and we're getting him at the height of probably his Jedi powers. Some might argue that it's in The Last Jedi that he's at his height. I don't think that's his height. I mean, he certainly does the greatest thing probably you can do, but he's kind of like the old hermit and not in his A game, right? It's kind of like Kenobi was. So in my opinion, this was at his height, and he did some pretty cool things, especially at the very end there where he literally stopped that shuttle that was entering one of the moons,
right?
That had what's her name on it? Well, it's Exum Panchard, really. But yeah, anyways, he was able to kind of stop that, and we got some cool lightsaber battles from him. But I guess what were some of the other highlights, and what kind of what kind of Luke Skywalker? Sorry, not to steal that one, but what kind of Luke Skywalker did we get here?
And this is the Luke everyone wanted, right? The Luke that, while he's powerful, but also knows his own limitations, or where the line should be. But again, I mean, we get to see him reaching out with the Force. We get to see and hear him talk with Lord Santeca about artifacts and what he's been chasing after and what's important to him. We get to see him interact with Ben a little bit and understand the relationship with Ben, and how there has been a little bit of a tug and war there, a bit with the familiarity between them as blood relatives, but also you get a bit of an idea of also who Ben is at that moment too. But I mean, this is the Luke that everyone wanted, though. And this is the Luke at his, I agree with you, probably at the height of his powers, of what we see, again, ability-wise, but also just, maturity and whatever else he was doing. And so I think this was a really good Luke Skywalker that maybe the ones who weren't so happy with how he looked in the sequel trilogy, this is very much a redemption for them in this moment. I like, though, that the interactions with Lando, right? He kind of wants to push Lando off at the first, right? Because he's worried about Lando's safety. Something's going wrong. There was this event at this archaeological dig where someone was murdered, and it seems weird. Lord Santeca, there's a whole thing. But when Lando starts to kind of just cross paths, when he starts learning of the Sith, Lando does, Luke's like, no, you got to stay away. But Lando, again, keeps pushing him to where you get this idea of what their friendship is. And while they've known each other a long time, they're not best friends. They're not like Lando and Han, who when they get together, you can just tell not only is there history, but there's chemistry and there's connection and everything else. But Lando and Luke, on the other hand, they're friends, but they also have this kind of disconnect between them, but they genuinely care for each other. Yeah. And so I thought it was kind of cool. We get to see some of that backstory, but I think what was really coolest about Luke, though, is there's a whole nother backstory apparently with this Comac character, who he helped purify her lightsabers, and when she was an acolyte of the Beyond. And it's like, okay, well, tell us that story now. And it's like, nope, sorry, save that for another day, apparently. Mm-hmm. But again, it was just really cool to be able to, again, the Luke Skywalker that people maybe felt like was shorted to them in the movies definitely exists in this time frame. And there's a lot of things he does beyond building a temple, but he's also come across these acolytes of the beyond. He's been doing other things. He's encountering darkness and he's chasing it. And so he is very much the character that people love and wanted to see. And then, of course, I know I'm kind of skirting around the whole vision that he had, because I know you're chomping at the bit there to talk about him and his dear old dad.
Yeah, well, this is the one thing that when I saw Adam at Celebration and the book had not come out yet, I went up to him. I said, there were two things that I really love that you've done with this book. And I went on and on about the family first and foremost. But then I said, the second thing is you've probably given people what they've always thought about ever since Return of the Jedi. And that is, what is that encounter? What is the relationship between Anakin Skywalker and Luke Skywalker look like? What does that father-son relationship look like? What would they say to each other? Right. And although we didn't get it in spades in terms of like, they didn't have the,
It was brief.
chapters,
Yeah.
it was very brief. But the fact that we know now that Luke and Anakin have spoken, and that of all things, Anakin came to save Luke, right? He was in the midst of this. I don't want to spoil too much of it, but he was kind of having these force visions and things weren't really going well. And Anakin went into that force vision area. Like he was able to kind of traverse that kind of space, pull Luke out of it so that, no harm would come to him, and then reappear to him as a force ghost in the real world. Was just really cool. And then them having this kind of like quick exchange as father and son. And it's just something that you'd always thought about, you always wondered about, and we got to at least have that. And I think for a lot of people that was kind of like just, it was really cool. So I did enjoy that. I want to just talk about, I guess, where Luke's journey is too. Like the fact that if you look at the cover, and you can kind of see Luke there, if you're watching the live stream here, but this is very much styled after what we see him in The Last Jedi, as when he comes and returns to Kylo Ren, he returns as what we see him now. So this is, if you imagine that look while you're reading this book, it's about that same time frame. The one thing that I have questions about, and again, knowing me, probably read too much into this, but it did sound like, for me, this felt like this potentially could have been the moments or the series of events that happen that start Luke down a path of really pulling away from Ben and really pulling away from his duties as, leading the Jedi Order. Because by this point, the Jedi Order is already up and running. He's got Padawans. He's got students. At one point in the book, he tells Ben to kind of go run the lesson, right? So he's kind of putting a lot of power and responsibility on him. And I don't know that the kid's ready for it, to be honest.
Right.
So, and I think that's part of the tension there. But because of the events that happen here, and because Luke was now realizing that, okay, there are some really, I think he knew that there were some pretty powerful artifacts out there, but I don't know that this wasn't the first time that he comes across several Sith artifacts, whether it be the blade or, more importantly, the mask of Exar Pancham, that he felt like, okay, these things are out there, and I've got to dedicate more time of going around with Lord Santeca, and we've really got to get a grasp on these things and get them under rein. And if these events weren't what led to that disconnect and the separation of Luke, it almost feels like Luke abandoned Ben, and Ben already feeling like he'd be abandoned by his mom and his dad, and now his master is abandoning him. My gut tells me that not very shortly after that is when Luke has the vision of, or starts having the visions of all that. There's a Snoke influence or the Emperor Palpatine influence on all this as well. We don't know how that plays into it. But I just wonder if what was happening here was what really started to kind of pull him away from what he was doing and the stability that he was bringing to the Jedi Order, because he felt like his duties needed to be elsewhere because of, possession and the risk the Sith could be back.
Right. And I think while the events that we see in the flashbacks in the sequel trilogy are probably several years away, I completely agree with you. I think this is the building blocks. We see Luke leave numerous times and be gone for a while, and then refuse to really give answers of sorts, because he can't. Ben is a Padawan. He's still too young to understand some things. The really dangerous artifacts you've got secured away. So there's only so much you can tell. And again, you start to feel Luke's isolationism. Lord Santeca and him have a bit of a relationship in that regard, that they can share some of that. But I have a feeling that's about it. Luke doesn't really have anybody else to really speak with about it. And so the isolation, you really do feel that from Luke, that there isn't many people around him that comprehend the position he's in, the responsibility that he has, the extra responsibility that he still feels. He knows that he should be have less familiarity with Ben as far as teacher and student, but has a hard time getting, kind of moving past some of that, but also relies on Ben in a lot of ways. So I agree with you. I think this could be the maybe the early hints of where Ben starts to get a bit of, what's the word? I don't know, a resentment, I guess, of, well, why are you always leaving? And you're making me take care of the kids. This is your job. You're the master. I'm a Padawan. I'm not even a Jedi Knight.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you can see where those things could snowball really quickly over the next several years. And I agree with you. I think this could be at least one moment where we see those types of things, and doesn't take very long to get past all of that and see where it can lead.
Yeah. Now, distracted is what I would call Luke, right? He seems very distracted now by all of these artifacts and the Sith and
again, it goes back to just him, I think.
Yeah.
Some of it's like, I mean, what do you expect from him at the same time, right?
Right.
Like, how can one person try to do all of these things when he is the only person?
Yep.
At least the only person that he knows of. We don't know if he's met Ahsoka. Doesn't sound like it. Well, maybe, I don't know. We don't have any kind of information about.
He's met her.
Well, he's met her now, but but she's not referenced at all in this book.
No.
Yeah.
So and just quickly, that Anakin Force vision, I don't know if he caught it, but there's a moment in there where he sees Sebastian Shaw, like the older Anakin Skywalker, because he's kind of like going back and forth.
Right.
And I saw another interview with Adam Christopher where he said that he put that in there because growing up, and he's about our age, growing up, that was his Luke Skywalker, right? He vividly remembers Sebastian Shaw before he was pulled out and they reinserted Hayden Christensen back into that scene. And so he wanted to pay tribute to Sebastian Shaw. So he wrote that in there, that there was a moment where you could see the older Anakins just as a tribute to him. So very cool.
I like that. Yeah, I did like that.
Okay. So let's talk about Lando. Why don't you kind of start us off here and kind of give us the sense of where Lando is, because he's in a very different place than when we last saw him, which I thought was either going to be Last Shot or the video game, and I don't know which one it is, but it's a different kind of Lando altogether at the very start.
Well, and either way, it's been several years, I think, from that moment. Yeah, Lando, that luster has been taken off of Lando. The swagger is there from time to time, but largely ever since his daughter was kidnapped, and we learned what her name is. It's Kadara, which is actually an Easter egg in itself, because Lando's original name was Kadar in the just in the manuscripts or the drafts?
It was one of the drafts, I think. Yeah.
Yeah. So that was kind of a cool Easter egg, but he's just not been able to find her, and he has a lot of guilt. He just carries it with him all the time. And we see this. So he's been hunting and hunting, and the trail goes cold, and he just feels a bit like a loser. And so he's just kind of drifting at this point until he gets a tip. Kind of right place at the right time. He hears some of Ochi's, henchmen, talking a little too loud at a bar. But then we start to see him get energized with this quest, right? And again, it's anything I think some of it is forcing himself to get energized about anything, but he borders on obsession though too, of, I couldn't help my daughter, so I hear this family, no, we have to help this family, we have to do it.
Yeah.
Anything to alleviate that guilt that he has. And also in that maybe fool's hope that some amount of information will come out of that, and he'll get lucky and he'll pick up that scent again, and that something else will happen. Now, what we end up learning is after he goes through all of this event, I mean, he's still kind of broken by the end of it, but he starts to have a new take on it with some kind of rehabilitation time with Comat on this really cool planet. But something that he finally heals the mind and the soul as much as resting and getting that physical wellness back. Yeah. But again, a very different Lando that really, he hears it pops up a thing about the Calrissian Chronicles, and he's like, I don't even know who this guy is anymore.
Yeah.
I mean, he just the almost disdain he has for the braggart that he was at times. He's like, it's just, what does it matter? So you kind of feel bad for him.
Yeah, he's in a weird place when this book starts. So it's been about what, 6 years, I think, that he's been looking for his daughter. He's come up cold in every way, and Luke has helped him out before. We don't know who all has helped him, but it sounded like it was kind of a group effort. So I'm assuming, Han probably had a hand in it. He probably did whatever he could. other people, other friends, and that he had made through the rebellion had probably gone in and helped him out. And everywhere they went, everything turned up kind of cold. And it's one of these like, okay, so after 6 years, do you continue to do this even though there's probably no chance? It's like you hear these real world life stories where families have a child that goes missing, and some families kind of, and I hate to say this, and I don't mean this in an insensitive way, but they kind of just throw in the towel, like, we've been doing this for 10 years, and we just have to accept that, we're probably never going to find her, and we've got to move on with our life, right? This can't be.
You need
what
some
defines.
some sort of closure.
Yeah.
Even if you don't get it, you have to kind of create it. Yeah.
And again, no disrespect, there are people that never throw in that towel, right? They have never given up. They've always kept hope and continue to search even to this day. And some of them unfortunately never find that. But for him, he did. I mean, 6 years is a pretty good run. I mean, you think about it. I mean, he was probably obsessed with that. And at the beginning of this book, hearing that, it's like you said, he becomes obsessed with trying to help this family because there is a daughter involved, and it's almost like it redefines him. It's almost like his new mission. It kind of gives him that spark, and it's what eventually carries him into Pisana, which I want to get into in a little bit, because that was kind of one of those one of those questions that I never really was able to kind of answer or rationalize to myself, is why was he on Pisana of all places when we get to
Right.
the Rise of Skywalker? But it makes sense. But he's back to his old ways. Very similar to like Leia going back and doing her thing when, things weren't going very well with Han. Han, we know, went back and got into, smuggling and some, maybe not as deep or hardcore as it used to be, but that he went back to old habits, things that he was very comfortable with, things that he was very much in control of. And that's what we see Lando doing here. He's back to gambling and, kind of going around different ports and stuff. I mean, nothing heavy, but it's all he's got left, right? And so this was really a great spark for him to kind of get motivated again. It was almost like a second chance for him of sorts to really get back.
But it still
on the
tore
paddle.
at him, though. It
Oh,
still
yeah.
tore at him because anytime that there was a disappointment or something, you could just feel it felt like the bottom was right there, ready to fall out for him as well. Anytime he ran into another dead end or something wasn't working out, you could just feel that despair creep in really, really quickly for him. So it was always right there on the surface.
Yeah. No, for sure. And the way, I did enjoy the Cow Wrestling Chronicles reference at the very, I mean, it's kind of how the book, it literally ends on him starting the next chapter of the Cow Wrestling Chronicles, which something like he hadn't done in a while. And for me, that tells me, we talked about earlier about the themes of rebirth and regrowth. And that certainly was kind of with Lando. I mean, maybe on a smaller scale, but this was a rebirth of sorts, right? He was rejuvenated, revigorated to go out and, try to help this family again. But the way it ends is he goes to Pisana because, one, he ends up chasing Ochi there for, what was it? There was the beads, and it kind of, I don't want to get into the whole story because there were some beads, but there was a natural, I mean, it all made sense for him as to why he would go there, but he decides to stay there because he's never really searched that sector of the galaxy. And that allowed him, since he was already there because of their, them staying and chasing Uchi, and they never found his body, right? So they never.
Right.
I mean, we know Uchi ended up going into like the sand pit or whatever it was, and got eaten by the snake or bit by whatever happened to him. Who cares? That guy's annoying. We're going to talk about him in just a minute. But he was there because he was on the trail of him and decided to stay there for that. But then also, again, he was like, okay, well, when I'm not doing that, maybe I'll look for my daughter again, right? And hopefully in a healthy way. But and then it feels like the third part of that is later on. Now, I don't want to bring Jana into this because we see her at the end of Rise of Skywalker. But from your thoughts, now that you've had this and you've had the Rise of Skywalker, the odds of Jana being his daughter, number one, is what I want your take on. And then two, what does that new story look like? Because eventually someone's going to tell that story. That wouldn't, as much as I didn't, I don't want to say I didn't care for the Rise of Skywalker. The Rise of Skywalker is not my favorite. I've been, there's some great moments in there. And I loved the fact that they laid down a lot of these open-ended things. I know that drove people crazy, but again, Lost is my favorite television series. So I really love that stuff. I don't need all the answers, right. But this is what it does. It spurs additional stories later for other authors to kind of pick up. We would never have gotten this Adam Christopher book had they not had that one line in there. And going back to Jana and Han Solo, when he says, well, why don't we well, crap, I screwed up the line. Whatever the line is, why don't we
Well,
go?
it was Lando too. Yeah.
It was Lando. Sorry. Why don't we go? Whatever.
Let's go find out.
That's what it was. Thank you. So, for what do you think? Is that going to be? I mean, that story's going to be told, but I guess how does this change what you suspect or theorize that would be?
Well, I mean, likelihood that she's his daughter seems 90, 95, 98% now. Of all,
really?
I mean, as crazy as that kind of seems, it just seems like there's a, I mean, when's the story going to be told, or is it going to be told? I guess at some point. It doesn't seem like there's a rush to tell stories after Rise of Skywalker, though, to be honest with you. So I don't expect to get anything of that really anytime soon. And quite honestly, I don't know how interesting that might be for me, but I'm sure for some people it might be really interesting depending on where it goes. But yeah, I'm just kind of under the opinion that it's probably Jana, and they're going to go back and try to research all the things of where she's been and how where she's been for the last 15, 20 years.
I don't. So if you think it's Jana, cool. I've always.
I was going to take it for what's in front of me, because that if I don't do that, it requires a lot of thinking.
I was kind of on board with that. I think this book changed my mind, though. I think this book made me think that, or believe now, that that's not his daughter. However, I do wonder if there's a connection, and not to connect all the dots, but I think it would be cool that through the exploration of Jana and where she's been, I don't know, and I haven't put a lot of thought into this, honestly, but if there's some kind of connection where there were other refugees. I mean, we know she was growing up with other people. Maybe one of those people was his daughter, and she actually happened to know her, or there were groups of these refugees that were kind of coming together, and oh yeah, she was a part of this group, and right, there's something that leads, because of Jana. Now he eventually finds his daughter. I think he's going to find his daughter.
Sure.
I don't think that it's Jana per se, but I think she's going to be critical to that if and when it does happen. Now, as far as it being exciting, I mean, I don't know. Look what Adam Christopher did with that one line from The Rise of Skywalker. I mean, he turned it into an entire novel. So, get him on that book. Maybe he can make that interesting. So as far as anything else about Lando, I think we've answered the question about Pisana. Oh wait, I want to go to Rob, because he says I'm a little confused. Let me pull this up. I'm a little confused as far as the timeline for Lando having a daughter. No mention in Aftermath or Last Shot, and I am with you there. I think it was really just a matter of timing. Again, the writers wrote what they wanted to in all three of the movies, and they laid down a lot of stuff. And I don't know that there was a whole lot of regard with, I mean, they just kind of gave them free rein to do whatever the heck they wanted and tell the stories that they wanted and put in these things. And so, does it line up? No, you're right. It probably doesn't line up, because you would think there would be a mention of that in one of those, but it is, it is canon now. I would say it is what it is, but I hate that. It is canon, at least, and so they're trying to make the best of it here.
I think the only other thing is we did get a Shriv cameo, so that was cool. For the people who were really into, what was that? Was that Fallen Order, or was that Battlefront?
That was, Battlefront 2. Yeah, Shriv. That made sense to me. Again, another Easter egg kind of thing, because he's from a video game, but absolutely made total sense that he would do that, because he is a contact within the Resistance, and they had an experience, and they had to, they drew blood together and shed blood together. So yeah, all that makes complete sense. And my God, that character is so well written. I wish they would do more with him. So, but we've talked about Shriv enough on this episode or on the show.
It's a time to talk about Ochia Bestun.
This dude.
That's kind of how he sounds in the audiobook. It's pretty obnoxious.
That's really obnoxious.
And he really says his name like that all the time.
Oh my gosh.
Tell me, Ochia Bestun.
Okay, I'm going to go read that or listen to the audiobook, because I need to hear this. He is the most annoying character in Star Wars in the galaxy.
He's a jackass, is what he is.
But I think he does bring. I love the levity that he brought to the book, because you can clearly tell he's an a-hole, right? And he's kind of all about himself, and I imagine he has the name of Sith or a Jedi assassin, which I don't believe. I don't know how.
You know how I equate him? He's like a fairly competent version of Dengar.
Well, that says a lot right there. So, well said. But he had his reactivation. Like it feels like, again, he's the character that in this book at the very beginning, he's kind of, I would say, down and out, but I mean, he's past his prime, right? He's no longer, he was a Jedi assassin or Jedi killer or whatever his title was back during the Clone Wars, which we never saw. So allegedly. But, you know, he's kind of in his later years now, and suddenly he gets a message. This is how Ochi, a Bestoon, gets pulled into this. He gets a message literally from Palpatine as this like ominous voice that just kind of like comes in, right? Disembodied voice, and starts talking to him, telling him that he's got a new mission. He used the word reactivated, that you're being reactivated. We're calling you up, and his whole purpose is to go find the girl and bring her to Exegol. And Ochi has been to Exegol before. We know that.
He's obsessed with going back. Yeah.
Well, and they all are, which I think is fascinating about Exegol. Because we probably could have put Exegol in here as a character to talk about, because there's so much that goes with the rebirth aspect of all of this. And everybody wants to get back to Exegol because they all want to be reborn. And apparently that is where you can be reborn. So Ben Solo's coming back. But he's been reactivated by the Emperor. He's given him purpose again. So why don't you talk about his, you know, the other things too, like the dagger, his ship, the
Bestoon Legacy.
The Bestoon Legacy.
Yeah, and I know what's on everyone's mind is Bestoon a place or what is it? And we have no idea.
Oh, really?
No one does.
I didn't know what that was.
Yeah, well, yeah, in the book they kind of make fun of it, like, is that a place? We don't know where this is, and they give him a hard time about it, but he never answers the question. So it might be something that he just made up.
I think it's funnier to think that all of this has just been made up, that he really is, like you said, a competent, just slightly more competent than Dengar, or just slightly below Dengar, but he's somehow built this legend, right? I think that would be hilarious to have somebody like that in Star Wars. But sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, yeah. But again, yeah, he's been reactivated. He's trying to, I mean, he's got these henchmen around him. Again, he seems fairly confident because he's able to he's able to hunt people down pretty well. And he is fairly intelligent when it comes to hunches and for, making logical, decisions and going along that line. But the Sith blade is kind of the wild card in all of this because he's got this blade, and I don't know if we ever get explained how he gets it. I'm trying to remember. Or is he just
the Acolytes of the Beyond, I think, give it to him.
Oh, that's right. They gave it to him. Yeah. And so this thing is like corrupting him over time, though, and he can feel this hunger from it. And, so as it goes on, it just kind of makes him more and more crazy, and to where he's just being more obsessed and drinking more heavily and whatnot. But I mean, I wish there was something more interesting about the character. He really is just kind of chasing after the family, and he's in a lot of the book. But
he's in a lot of the book.
Yeah, but honestly, there was nothing super memorable about any of his thing because he's a pretty flat character. And I'm not saying that from a critical standpoint. He's just kind of a one-note character for the most part, where he just kind of fits all of the normal, the normal things you would think of about a bounty hunter that's past his prime.
Yeah.
So did you get a different impression from him other than that?
No.
I mean, he was literally to chase things from point to point. Kind of was the point.
Yeah, and he was the foil for the most part, right? He was the foil to the family. He was the foil at times to like Luke and Lando, and he certainly had a part in this book. And I think, and maybe I'll just try to weave in the criticisms that I have. This is one of the criticisms that I have of the book. Like, I didn't like OG could have been. He had to be OG because of the book, right, or the movie. I get that. But to your point, I don't know if that was really necessarily a slight for Adam in the fact that, because this isn't his character, right? He didn't write this character. Right. He had already established, and this character has been existing and living in the comics for a number of issues now. He's got a long life and all of that. So he was really just kind of bringing him into this book. But from that regard, like you said, I don't know that he really did a whole lot other than he was just in pursuit of them and was constantly foiling them. I thought he brought levity, which I think was really the only, like, I really don't like this character at all, to be honest. I've always hated him, and I hate the fact when you do that Uchiha Bestoon thing that you do, but that's between you and I. So
Uchiha Bestoon.
There you go. Oh, just sends shivers down my spine. So I don't know. I just didn't. He was just kind of there. And
I think that's okay because again, all the other characters, they were the ones with the story you wanted to know.
Yeah.
And so to not litter it in with another backstory or another huge character arc or something like that, I think it's totally fine. So I don't, like I said, it wasn't criticism that he was a bit of a flat character. He was supposed to, he did his job of moving the story along and chasing and keeping people moving. But in and of himself, he wasn't super interesting, although he had a really super interesting artifact with him.
Yeah. His best moments were at the very beginning when the Emperor was talking to him and he was kind of like flipping out, right? And then later on, and why don't we just talk about him now? Because I don't want to forget, but let's talk about Emmerich Pride, who is steadfast. So for anybody that's, was General Allegiance, what was his title?
Allegiant General.
Allegiant General, sorry. Allegiant General Pride, who we saw in The Rise of Skywalker. Yes.
Yes. He's the one where, he's the one that shoots Hawks.
Yes. Shoots Hawks.
Yes.
He's had enough of him.
Yep.
That character makes an appearance in this book. And again, this is years before we get to The Rise of Skywalker, of course. But it's some of the best stuff in. He's got like 2 chapters in the middle of the book, and then we get back to him at the very end of the book. And to make a long story short, he just is like a pompous a-hole. He hates, he's just so critical of things, very
but he's a bit directionless too. Yeah, he's full of himself, but doesn't have any real career, I don't know, motivation behind him either. He's just swigging from a flask most of the time.
Right. Because he was part of the Imperials, right? The Galactic Empire at one point. And then when that all fell apart, he went on to, he's kind of almost got this bitterness about him because of the resistance. And that's why when we see him, he's like all about Emperor Palpatine. I forget the line that he said there. I probably should have watched this movie another time before this, but you can tell he's very dedicated to the old way. And he's very dedicated to Palpatine, especially because that's who he was following. And now he's got this guy Hux and this wannabe Sith Lord named Kylo Ren, and they're kind of calling the shots, and he's been around for a number of years. But we get this very, very young version of him. But there's a moment there where he hates Uchiha Bestoon. Like, he hates him so much, and he gets under his skin. He's kind of like speaking for us as the audience, right? And how much he disdains this character. And there's a moment there where they pull up their ships together, and visually I'm putting my hands together now, but they pull up their ships together window to window, and it's like they're so close to each other, and they're talking to each other through the, I don't know, PA system or whatever they use in Star Wars. And anyways, it's just a funny moment when they're talking back and forth because Ochi's definitely trying to make him upset. He doesn't like him. The best part of this whole thing, though, and not to spoil too much, but the best part of this whole thing is he makes a comment in there about Ewoks. This is Emmerich Pride, and how when he was in Return of the, I guess during the Battle of Endor, that they had taken these Ewoks and had skinned them, and then he was talking about he killed an entire family to line the inside of his fur coat, his long trench coat.
Best coat he's ever owned. Yeah,
with the best coat he's ever owned, the warmest coat he's ever owned, with that fine Ewok fur that it's just so creepy and disgusting and so appropriate for the character. So I think those were the best moments with him is when he was with whenever Ochi and Pride were together, because you could tell those guys hated each other so much. Right. Look at that. There's Lauren. She says that was messed up. Hate him. Sorry, I know I probably got under her skin about talking about, no pun intended. Probably got under her skin about getting the Ewoks there for a second. Okay, let's move on from Ochi. Let's talk about Kaiza Soche and Viceroy Exum Panchard. What do you got?
Wow. So Kaiza is a way to just say, go.
Yeah, go. I'm tired of talking. It's your turn.
Right. So Kaiza is a former acolyte of the Beyond, and Viceroy Exum Panchard. What's really cool about him is that he's this ancient evil. And if you remember the show that we did during the Vader series about Lord Momin and how he has imbued his essence into a mask, although not really intentionally, this is a very, very similar concept where Exum Panchard, his essence is within this mask, but his goal is to try to come back to life as well. So he is basically, anytime that Kaiza puts this mask on, she is effectively taken over by him in some kind of way. I think it gets progressively, more and more. And I don't know. You probably have a lot more of the details though about what like actual Kaiza, like what her her backstory was and tragedy and some of that.
Yeah, I mean, there's a whole story that was explored in the. If you haven't had a chance to read the Aftermath novels, they get into all of that and how she got her lightsaber, and eventually that was handed off to or she got the lightsaber from her boyfriend, who she ended up killing. And the short story is she is an acolyte of the Beyond. She was mentioned in that series. We know that she's a Pantoran as well. I think that was one of the first clues they kind of gave us when they were giving us the excerpts and all that, or they were hinting at who one of the characters would be. And she's being pulled into this because she's being driven by, like you said, expansion, who is a Sith Lord who really wants to get the Exegol to be reborn. The cool things about her were that they brought in the Dark Noctis lightsaber, which was this curved scimitar, red scimitar lightsaber that we get in the Dark Legends stuff by George Mann. Wonderful story. Can't recommend it. I know I talked about it at left. At some point, I do want to do something with that story because it's got such a cool twist at the very end that you're not expecting, which was awesome. But we got that in there. So again, another way to kind of work that into it. But the one thing that's really compelling for me, and I want to get into Exegol just in his backstory here a little bit because it's pretty cynical and it's pretty dark compared to a lot of the Sith Lords. And I know we've had some pretty cool stories and legends, but this one's pretty dark. I mean, he really got into some dark stuff here. But with him, this idea of possessing items, at some point, I don't know, we need to work this into a show as well. But I do want to get into, like, the Sith are so obsessed with afterlife, and we know that they can't live, because Liz has already said, right, they can't live as Force ghosts. It's beyond them. They'll never be able to because they're not in touch with the light side, and that's why Anakin was able to do it, because he came back to the light. So they're consumed by dark. The only way they have, at least that we know of until Palpatine, is to do that. They possess items of sorts. They transfer their life essences into their objects, and there's possession and almost demonic in that fashion. But Exegol is kind of a game changer, and I'm wanting to, like, with, you know, what was Exum's strategy. Like, he would get to Exegol with Kaiza wearing the mask, but then what was the plan there? And I don't know the answer to it, but I would assume it's going to be something along the lines of possessing somebody else or taking a body and transferring everything from the mask into that body of some sort. It's almost like they were trying to do exactly what Palpatine was doing exactly what Adam Panchard was trying to do.
Right. They had very similar goals on the surface.
Well, and I think it's partly because I think Palpatine's studies are coming from this, right? He's had to have learned this is a possibility, and it would only be possible on Exegol of all the places. So from that perspective, I hope to explore that more. What's really interesting is the fact that you have a character like this who lived so long and had some really horrible things and was never able to figure it out. And it got me thinking about, like, was Palpatine trying to transfer his life into a living body, and that's why it kept failing. And so it wasn't until they transferred his life into a dead body that's now an inanimate object, much like a dagger, much like a mask, you know what I mean? And that's what allowed him to, like, okay, so now his and just stay with me here. His life force now is in possession of an inanimate object, and now the next thing they do is, how do we bring this dead body back to life? And maybe it's through that mechanism thing, whatever he was on, you know, that Palpatine, that Deus Ex Machina thing. Maybe it was was part of all of that. And so I think that was the key. I think he figured it out. That's how you had to do it, rather than trying to transfer your life force into somebody else's live body. I don't think that really works that way. So,
all right, a little bit of context quick. So for people that might be lost about what's going on here. So Luke is fighting Kaiza. So they finally get this confrontation. He's fighting Kaiza, and they're in this kind of well of sorts. And long story short, he defeats her. It collapses in. Kaiza's dead. But the mask has had all of these. So Luke found some, or I guess really Lor San Tekka and this archaeological dig we talked about way at the beginning of the show, found some shattered kyber crystals. And so these crystals, long story short, somehow get shattered further and all get imbued into the mask, which just amplify its power. And so what Exum Panchar is able to do is he's actually able to reanimate Kaiza's body, and so bring someone back from the dead, literally, And well, it's unclear. They make it seem like it's unclear that if she's dead or not, but I think she's clearly dead.
Yeah.
And I think they finally do confirm that later on. But that's the part that's really interesting of what Albert was just talking about, is because now you have not only imbuing yourself into, just physical, tangible things that aren't living, inanimate, but now you've actually done it with a person. And how does that work? And then, we'd asked Adam Christopher about, do Panchard and Palpatine's goals cross or anything like that? And in his mind, I think they were still pretty independent of one another. But I'm with you. I think what happens if Exum gets to Exegol, and he has the presence of Palpatine? Does he try to take over Palpatine or vice versa? I mean, there's a really potentially bad set of things going on, between these two characters if that were to actually take off.
Mm-hmm.
But I again, like you said, this is a pretty sadistic guy. The stuff he's done in the past, I think he's like 1,000 years old or something. I mean, he's called an ancient evil. And I think that was the idea, is that you have this really old evil that's just really sinister and actual, nothing quite what we've had before. And so where it really feels different than anything you've ever experienced. And so when Anakin shows up and a Force Ghost has to rescue Luke, like Anakin is all distorted and everything else,
mm-hmm.
and can't maintain his presence because of this distortion in the Force. And so it's a really interesting power that he has, and just how persistent and pervasive this power can be across, the distances and in the Force and everything else. So it was a little confusing at first to try to kind of figure some of that out, but I think overall I liked where they finally went with the character, and really did feel like a really formidable force.
Yeah, I think. I see what you did there. I actually enjoyed like that part of the book when he's talking about, like, there's moments in there where we get these flashbacks, and I'm curious as to how it came out in the audiobook, but as a reading the book, I thought it worked really well. But he was cutting to these flashbacks, and you're getting visions of what Panchard had gone through in his life and how sadistic he was. I mean, he just, in a nutshell, he killed everybody. And labored and butchered them and just loved. He relished in the idea of just slaughtering people and their blood spewing everywhere and getting all over him. I mean, he was just obsessed with it, right? And these are people that were serving him. I mean, he's just absolutely pure chaotic evil in a lot of ways. And even with like Palpatine, we talk about this all the time, not to bring Dungeons and Dragons in this, but we always said that Palpatine's at least lawful evil, right? There's a level of lawfulness there. Because he knows that he needs that in order to kind of maintain control of the galaxy, where somebody like Panchard, he's purely chaotic evil. He just kill anybody at all times and enjoys it and loves the fact that he was doing it. But we had lots of flashbacks where he did this. It wasn't just like one or two. It was like 3 or 4, if I remember. So from that regard, I did enjoy how sadistic he was. I wish they would do more with this character. I wish we could get more of that character, because I think it's a really dark place for Star Wars to go. And I've always been kind of a sucker for that stuff, even though I know it's probably a far cry that we'll ever see anything like that. But to kind of bring it back to the book, and at least at the very end, eventually the mask gets cut in half. Luke cuts it with, there's a cool moment in there where they're having a lightsaber battle. I don't know if you remember this, where it's the scimitar. So it's the Darth Noctis lightsaber, so the curved red scimitar. It's Luke's green lightsaber, and then Comat pulls out her lightsaber. And so you've got this clash of red, white, and green. And the way he was describing that battle was really cool. Like, I loved the way that would look. So I would really wish that we could get this like on a comic book form of some sort.
Yeah, at least get some sort of artwork for it.
Yeah. But the mask is cut. I mean, Luke eventually breaks the mask or cuts it in 4 pieces, and that ends allegedly. Like, I have questions now because he doesn't really tie anything up. I mean, we're just kind of left to assume that that's the end of Eggs and Panchard, but I mean, maybe there is more. Right. Maybe there's more that could still happen there.
And Luke takes the mask and locks it away in whatever the new version of the Bogan collection, I guess, is.
Oh, that lost Bogan collection. It's got all kinds of cool trinkets in it.
He's got a vault down there in the basement of the temple.
Yeah.
Like every other good Jedi temple should have.
We'll talk more about this guy and Kaiza and the Alkalites of the Beyond. There's enough here, I think, that we could start throwing some stuff together. Okay, but let's wrap up by talking about the last character that at least I want to talk about for this episode, and that's Comat and KB68. We've already mentioned Comat as being this former Alkalite of the Beyond. She had a relationship with Kaisa as well, so we know that they knew each other. I think at one point she referenced her as she used to be her sister, right? So there was some kind of a
Right.
bond there. I wouldn't say it was super close, but they knew each other.
I think that might be just how the
How they
the
talk.
brother. I think that's how the
Yeah.
brotherhood works or something like that.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's fair. But she definitely knew her, and she is now a character who has been converted thanks to Luke Skywalker. Like he's helped her get past all of that. We mentioned earlier at some point he kind of very nonchalantly throws in there, oh yeah, I went and helped her cleanse her sabers so they're white, or her lightsaber so it's white now. And I'm thinking, okay, where's that story? I want to know what that's
Right.
like. But we know Luke knew her, and so at some point in the book, we need to track Ochia Bastoon. And there's a whole bunch of science in there, which I won't get into as far as how they do it with the particles and all that. But they go to this planet because they know that she has this kind of innate ability. Like it's not even like I don't know if it's a force ability of some sort, but she has an ability, a natural ability to be able to kind of detect where ships are based on these particles that are emitted from engines. And again, kind of weird science fiction type stuff. But she's living on a planet of all places, a planet that was ravaged by the wars, right? And there's a Mon Calamari ship that had been crashed on this planet that she's living in, and this Mon Calamari ship it's like malfunctioning.
It's emitting this radiation
Yeah.
type of field. Yeah.
The whole planet is like covered in radiation, and so when Luke and Lando get there, they're like immediately getting hit with this radiation. They have to wear certain suits and all that stuff. But she somehow found a way to live there, and she's got this really cool theme that part where she's
She
talking
farms
about
it.
how,
Yeah.
yeah, like exactly, she's farming it. Like she's turned something awful into something good, right? Going back to that whole rebirth thing. I mean, that planet was pretty much gone until she got there, and she found a way to kind of rebirth the planet, if you will.
And she's there basically in exile to, it's kind of like the Barash vow a little bit from what we've seen, but she's very much trying to, I don't know what she's trying to do. Actually, I'm trying to remember.
What she
It's
was
been a
doing.
while.
I don't
Yeah,
I don't
I
think
mean, yeah.
anything other than just live out her life. I don't think there was anything that she was.
I think that was what it was, not really an atonement of any sorts, but I think it was very much a reflection and just living in solitude for all of the things that she had done in the past.
Mhm.
And that was her penance, if you will.
Yeah. But more importantly, she has a droid named KB-68, who's kind of like this enforcer droid. It's almost like an assassin droid of sorts that
Yeah.
wields a saber. She's able to kind of fight with it at all times. The droid can fight with that lightsaber or the blade, and it's like a weapons master almost of sorts.
Right.
And there's a moment there where I know Lando was checking her out. Like he's like enamored by her. Like this is his next love. Forget.
Well, but he also snuck a look at Comat there too.
Yeah, but that's not his thing. He's all into the droid stuff. And this is just like his rebound for L337 or whoever he's been with.
Lando takes pansexual to a whole nother level.
Yep. But yeah, he was just like, there's a moment there where I think she saves his life. Like she comes to his rescue. And you remember the moment, I don't know if you remember Conan. I hate to bring in old movies here, but Conan, there's a moment in there where the woman that he loved comes back as kind of like this god and like saves him. And he looks up and she's sitting there in all this shiny armor and there's a glow and halo around her. That's exactly how I envisioned KB-68 looking to Lando when she comes in and saves him, because he's on the ground, he's taking fire, and she just comes and saves him. But I think she was checking him out too. So I've already shipped them. I mean, that's just the way it happens. But
Could I tell you what song popped in my head as you described all that?
oh, sure. What song is that?
Whitney Houston from The Bodyguard.
Yeah, I can see that. Yeah, it's not a far cry from that. I mean, that's exactly.
I Will Always Love
I
You.
will always love you. Lauren says she's trying to have peace with her cat. That's right. She's
It's
got
a
a Targon.
Targon.
Yeah. So again, I don't think we had those until the High Republic. So,
Right. Giant lion looking things. Yeah.
Lena So with her little two line, but yeah, she has that cat too. So there's a lot there with Comat. She plays a pivotal role, but certainly a smaller role in the grand scheme of things. But the cool thing was, if you listen to the interview or watch the interview, it did sound like there was potential here for more Comat storytelling, whether it be before or after.
Wasn't allowed to talk about something about it.
Yeah. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. Okay, so if you're a Comat fan, pretty good chance that we'll get something. I don't know what that's going to be.
Don't get him in trouble, man.
Hey, I already pitched my idea for his story on what is it, from a certain point of view for the Return of the Jedi series. So, and if that
For
happens, oh my
Pride.
God, you'll never hear the end of it. I'll just retire. I'll retire from the show immediately when that comes out.
Yeah, if there's a story about Enric Pride in the Return of the Jedi from a certain point of view, you will never hear the end of it.
Yep, I gave him that one. Okay. Well, I think we'll leave it there. There's still a lot more to be said. There's certainly this book. I guess, how about that? I guess as far as closing thoughts, I have a question here. What will this book give way to? And what I mean by that is the Rise of Skywalker gave us a lot of material. It gave us a lot of world building. And I know that rubbed people the wrong way because it felt like they were just introducing more things without wrapping up some things. And they felt some of the things were rushed and lazy and all that kind of stuff. I get all that. But this book does the same thing in that I didn't mean it that way. This book did lay down some things that we had not considered. It introduced us new things like Comat, for example. More on this idea of possession by the Dark Lords and Sith and all that. What do you think this book is going to spawn? And it doesn't have to be immediately. It could be subtle things. It could be just Easter eggs later down the road. Do you see there's like a future here where there's books that are spawning from this as well?
Maybe. Well, I think maybe it's hard to avoid them. I think with Luke Skywalker, and I think what it did show is that Luke Skywalker can be written and can be written well, and in a way that people are going to enjoy of what they've been asking for. And there's people who can do it right and approach the character in the right way. So I think this opens that door to Luke Skywalker stories in this timeline and in this, in this 30-year window that people have been asking for. Like, where's my Luke Skywalker that I grew up with? And I think now it's a very real possibility that we might see more of the character. I think we might see, by extension, more of Han and Leia in this time frame too, right? I mean, we already know we're getting Princess and Scoundrel coming up here pretty soon and some of those stories, but I think we're going to get some of the stuff in between. But where I'm most interested in then is to see like a character like Comat and explore more of these other maybe smaller bit part type of characters that now all of a sudden have a lot more interest and a lot more excitement behind their backstory, that they're starting to become something. And that's what I'm excited about now, because now we've got this idea of Exegol and we can continue building on the mystique of Exegol and for still a place that we know really very little about, and learning more about the acolytes, acolytes of the Beyond. How does this tie in with the TV show that's coming? And so I mean, there's a lot of different ways that we can go with all of this stuff. But I think for two things, one is like, okay, well, we've got a new set of characters that are interesting, but then we've also unlocked Luke Skywalker, I think, for something that we can trickle things out. We don't want to inundate, but things can trickle out for Luke Skywalker now in the next 5, 6, 7 years.
Yeah. I'm with you. Like I agree on all that. I mean, Exegol is fascinating even more so than it was. There was a lot of that in here, which I was really happy to read about, know more about. I would like to see that explored. Maybe we will. Maybe Acolytes of the Beyond, because Exegol has been around forever, right? This wasn't something that just recently popped up in the last 20 years. It's been around for eons,
and it can weave in and out of material at will in any timeline, right?
Yeah. The whole Acolytes of the Beyond, I think, are fascinating. I'd like to see more of that. I know we had some of that in the Aftermath series, of course, but they've both of those, in my opinion, have just, this book, it brings much more life to that. Lando and his daughter, we've talked about that. I mean, that would be potentially something I'd like to see kind of spawn out from this. The Comat and KB-68. I don't even think it needs to necessarily tie into this, right? She could do anything. There could be any story that has her in it, and I would be interested, because I think he did such a good job of introducing a very interesting, intriguing character, especially one that used to be an Acolyte of the Beyond and has now has got this white lightsaber, and like, what is she doing with it? I mean, she's doing nothing right now. We know that.
Right.
Chilling with her cat. But what's her call to action, and what's that going to look like when it does happen, and what time frame is that going to happen in? Which would be another question there. And then Luke is kind of like this relic hunter, almost like an Indiana Jones. I mean, we kind of knew this was happening. We knew that from the video game Battlefront 2.
Right.
He was kind of going around and looking for these old artifacts, and he was collecting them all. And we just know that's been happening. But there was something about the very beginning of this book where they were at that archaeological dig site that got me thinking, well, if he doesn't do it, then maybe it's Beaumont Kin. Maybe we get stories of Beaumont Kin where he's going around and now he becomes the Indiana Jones and all that. I mean, it's Dominic. What is it? Dominic Monaghan, or is his name?
Monaghan. Yeah.
Monaghan.
Monaghan. Yep.
He just posted something on Twitter. I don't know if you saw this like 2 days ago, like hinting that Star Wars stuff was coming. I don't know. I'm sure it's related. So maybe they do. Maybe they find. I mean, he's only a student in this book, and he's like an archaeological student. And I'm not saying they're going to go down the Indiana Jones path. I was already envisioning him with like a scruffy looking beard and the fedora, but in Star Wars.
But no bullwhip, because they don't have bullwhips in Star Wars.
Would be well, they do. They have.
It'd be it'd be a light whip.
Yeah, exactly. We saw them in Bad Batch.
True. That's right.
So yeah, they can do it. Another idea. Look, free of charge. I'm handing these things out just left and right. Okay, so the last thing I'll say about the book is, I guess my overall kind of closing thoughts and Adam Christopher. I thought he did a really good job. He wrote a really good Star Wars book. It did remind me a lot of like the good Legends, like the really good Legends books from that regard. The criticisms that I have were probably about Uchiha Bassoon, which I don't think was really his fault. I think in the middle, it kind of felt a little slower. Like that first third of the book is just so, like, there's so many references and so many things that get you really excited. And it does crawl a little bit in the middle.
It's when they're crossing paths. And if it's that middling part that always kind of struggles. And then you finally regain your footing and then you're off and running again.
Exactly. And because the ending and the beginning were so strong, it's hard not to recommend this book to anybody. But I think the one thing, and we've kind of skirted around this, haven't really talked about it too much, is I think this book does a really good job of, and I use this word a lot lately, but it's true. It does a good job of recontextualizing the rise of Skywalker, some of the events from The Last Jedi. I mean, he threaded a very fine needle here in connecting everything from the prequel trilogy to the original trilogy to the sequel trilogy, giving us a lot of the backstory that people are now using as, weaponizing as fixing, which I don't believe that is. But he did a really good job of just kind of bringing all of this in. And I think it does really well for the Rise of Skywalker. So if you had problems with that movie, I think going back and reading this book and then watching the movie, which I've not done yet, I'd love to come back and talk about this or maybe just post something about it. But I really want to go back and watch The Rise of Skywalker. I just haven't had a lot of time here recently. But now that I haven't read this book, I want to go back and watch that and see what it does, because I've seen many people who have maybe not come around completely to The Rise of Skywalker, but they certainly have much more appreciation because of what Adam Christopher's done. And I mean, what a way to leave your mark on the Star Wars legacy, right? Than going in and making people reconnect with that movie in a way they didn't when it first came out.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think a couple of things you've used before is this book felt cinematic. It really did feel big and grand and, very like you're watching a movie play out, but on a page. And I think that's a really huge compliment. And, whatever you say about Adam Christopher, whether you like his writing or not, you cannot argue how much this guy knows about Star Wars. Yeah. And man, just his breadth of knowledge and how much he loves Star Wars. I mean, it's hard to talk about something that he doesn't know about. It's crazy. This guy seems to know everything. So it's really cool that you feel like someone that you have this camaraderie with of just how big of a fan you are. And is so, man, he's just so level-headed and so easygoing and likes having conversations. I mean, you just can't help but want people like that to succeed. And especially when they write really good material and have really good material. I'm hoping this is, very much a first of, these larger opportunities for him to continue to expand, writing novels in the Star Wars universe, because I for one would be happy to pick up the next one, whatever that might be, because when he gets an idea, I mean, with that breadth of knowledge and appreciation for all things, whether it's canon or not, no matter what timeline you're in, there's something there that he can pull out of it and make into it. And I think that's a really unique set of skills. And for someone he's just a super quiet guy, a sweet guy, just going along, trying to have fun, make his own mark in Star Wars and, do it in the right way. And it's hard not to root for people like that. And I think this book is it's hard not to recommend this book because it's so important to make sense of some of the sequel trilogy. And I know he didn't really set out to do that.
Right.
I know
that's important. That's important note. So go ahead.
Yeah. He did not mean to do that. It wasn't his intention to do anything. He really actually wanted it to be kind of more of a standalone like in between movie. Like he was writing a movie, what happened in the in between years between Return of the Jedi and Force Awakens. Now, and he didn't realize at the end of the day that he ended up writing a sequel and a prequel at the same time. But I think we're all the better for it, because I agree with you. When you rewatch, I'm going to guess probably Rise of Skywalker more so than Force Awakens, but both of those, I imagine you're going to have a much better appreciation. And my guess is you'll probably enjoy them a bit more, knowing that you had these, but you couldn't have all this beforehand, like you said earlier.
Exactly. Yeah.
It would have spoiled everything, because then you would have known that Dayton was Palpatine's kid and Rey was, what was it, Palpatine? So all of those questions and all those debates and all that fun that we had, regardless of how frustrating it may have been at times, none of that would have been possible without some of that. And then books, this is where books in particular really do come in and help you appreciate some of the things a little bit better. And you can call it fixing if you want. It's definitely enhancing and adding. But I think it was done in a certain way. They're like, that makes a lot of sense. That actually works. I could see that wasn't shoehorning it in. Like, that actually works. And I think that's a testament to, the flexibility that Lucasfilm gave Adam Christopher, but also just Adam Christopher's, ability, interest, and fandom going in here of what he wanted to tell and how he was able to do it.
Yeah, no, well said. I agree with all of that. So yeah, go out and read the book if you had an itch. I mean, if you're listening to this and you've already read it, hopefully. Otherwise, if you're not, I mean, hopefully we gave you enough to kind of fill in the blanks, but I think you owe it to yourself to go at least pick it up or, borrow it or check it out from the library or something. Because there are some really good moments in here that are a lot of fun to read. And at some point, much like we've done with other books, we'll probably do some breakout episodes and just kind of do some spotlights and focuses on certain things. Some of which we've already kind of touched on, but there's enough here that I think we can mine from it in future episodes. I'm looking forward to that quite a bit.
Absolutely.
And go listen to the interview too, or watch the interview if you're a Patreon member.
It's worth it. It's only about, it's less than an hour. Shocking, I know. And that's with the speed round. Right. Yeah. Well, we promised. Yeah. We promised we'd keep it to an hour. And, but I think he would have sat there all day with us if we wanted to.
Sure.
But yeah, go listen to that interview, not just because we're proud of what we did, but I think you'll actually really enjoy it, because he had a lot of interesting things to say, and who better to hear it from than right from the creator himself.
Well, and last thing. He said that he wrote this book as a fan. Like, we've already talked about him. We vetted him in the 20 questions, even though he got some of them wrong. We vetted him as a true Star Wars person, And
I think he got some of those exactly right.
Shut up. But you got somebody who knows, like you said, so much about Star Wars, loves Star Wars so much. And all the writers really, and some of the creators of Star Wars more recently with Disney, they get so much crap about not having read the books, and they knew nothing about Star Wars. And, what's her name that's writing the Acolyte of Beyond made that comment about not having seen Star Wars, and that was giving her a fresh start. And I'm fine with all that.
And Taika Waititi with Natalie Portman lately.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Asking her, would you ever be in a Star Wars? And like, hey, dude, I was. So if you're giving them, if you can't have it both ways. So here now, you generally have somebody who is a real Star Wars, quote, fan. And I say real Star Wars, I'm using air quotes because that's their term, not my term. But quote, a real Star Wars fan because they grew up with the legend stuff. They were around, they saw Star Wars when it first came out, even though he was like 5 years old or however old he was. Played with all the Kenner toys, is a huge X-Wing Stackpole fanatic, right? Knows all about the prequels and the sequels and the original trilogy. And here he's been given an opportunity to write a book, and he wrote this book as a Star Wars fan, thinking like, what would I want to read? What would I want to see? And I think that really comes out. It surfaces very well in this. And so, again, I guess the point I'm making there is you owe it to yourself to at least give this book a shot if you're not into the books, because it's a different perspective, I think, coming in. All right. We'll leave it there. What do you got? Any shout outs before we get out of here?
Yeah, we do. We had a live stream tonight. So thanks everyone for coming out. If you're listening to us on the podcast, we do recommend you come out and visit us on usually Tuesdays and Thursdays. We're not doing a Thursday show this week, but we're over on YouTube. Just go find us over there. Look for Cantina Cast. Tonight we had Jonathan, Steph, Lauren, Sky, Qui-Gon J, Rob, Katya, Diego, and Jorge. Thank you all for all of the chat. Anybody who is lurking in the background, thank you so much for your support. And of course, a huge thank you to all of our Patreon members who help make all this possible. Everything y'all give us goes straight back into the show. We don't pocket any of it. Well, temporarily we pocket it and then we put it back into the show. But yes, That's just how logistics
That's how
work.
money works. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Let's come in and go right up.
But no, we certainly appreciate everyone's support and for listening in and tuning in and downloading the show.
And thank you again to Del Rey and to Adam Christopher for the advanced copies so that we could do this, and certainly the opportunity to do the interview. I've got next week.
A special, and thank you to Lauren. What's her last name now? Or no, Lauren Kreshmeyer.
Kreshmeyer, yeah.
Yep. For helping organize it.
Set all this up, yeah. Next week, we've got, we're going to finally get into the Mando Season 3 trailer. So we'll kind of...
Unofficially leaked trailer.
Spill the tea on that one. We're going to do screenshots. They can't stop me from that. We'll at least do screenshots. So we'll break that down. That'll probably be a 3-hour show. And then I've also got, I think for Patreon, hey, Jonesy, I haven't talked to you about this yet, but for Patreon, I think I want to get into some of what we talked about. There are certain themes, or we may get into the Dark Lords and Rebirth. I've always had this in mind of doing a show about rebirth, about birth and rebirth in Star Wars. And this gave us more ammo. So at some point I want to do that. But I think what we'll do for Patreon here in the next couple weeks is get into some more like spotlight discussions and theories and stuff like that, and really leverage a lot of what we found.
I see right through your games, Padilla, because I know what the purpose of that is.
Because we're going to get into the Ben Solo.
Yes, you were going to find every justifiable reason that Ben Solo will be resurrected from the dead.
Yep.
In a not creepy Sith way.
Guilty as charged.
Yes.
He's coming back.
You are coming back.
All right, guys. Any final words before we get out of here?
No, thanks, everyone.
Okay, we'll see you guys next week.
You're still listening? Wow. That's amazing. Well, I'm here to give you the disclaimer. Normally we do a big, long, drawn-out disclaimer thing saying what's what and who's what and all that other stuff, but I think you guys kind of know that Lucasfilm and Disney have no affiliation with us at all, and we have none with them. We talk about Star Wars, which is their property and all that other good, fun stuff, but I think you can tell which is our stuff and which is their stuff. If you can't, well, then send a lawyer to send an email to me, and I'll be glad to chat with them. Other than that, you know what's what, so that's your disclaimer.